my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. Flying solo on today's show because I feel like I've been just not that I feel like I've been slacking. I know I've been slacking, and not slacking on purpose, but just a lot going on. We had on Tuesday, I wanted to bring you the new episode of The Street Stoic as we kick off the Just Be Social Club, the new version of it via Patreon. Again, it's free. Shout out to everybody that DM'd me that wanted to join to get the link. It's still open at DJ Dramos. I'll send it to you. It's free. Ton of stuff on there already, and I'm going to continue to add to it as the weeks and forever goes on, basically. And then we were off last week because of the holiday for 4th of July, and yeah, I'm like itching to just sit down and talk to myself for a minute, I guess. As vain as that may sound. So I wanted to just, cover a bunch of things that I feel like I've missed over the last couple of weeks, not having done a fresh episode, from start to finish. Also, I want to give a big shout out, and this is what we need to have more of, right? I was randomly on the Cultura podcast network YouTube channel. That's where you can find the video version of this podcast if you ever want to check that out. It's mostly just me sitting in a chair and then like random shots of my dog walking by and ruining everything. So if you're into that kind of thing, please feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel and watch the video version of the show. But I was reading randomly like a comment that was left on one of the episodes, and shout out to her. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she was saying, she listens to the podcast even though she doesn't particularly agree with my political views. And I thought that was so beautiful. Like, to me, that is what we need more of in this country, in this world, is the idea that we can have opposing viewpoints on things and still coexist together and still enjoy each other in some capacity, right? I think for me, the older I get and the more I dive into topics that are sensitive like politics, I try my best. I'm not always, perfect at it, but I try my best to come at it from a point of view of I'm not trying to be right. I am giving you information, and then I'm giving you my digestion of the information, all with the goal of trying to get to what I feel like is the best answer, right? I'm never trying to, at least my goal is to not be trying to win like an argument or a debate. My goal is, how do we get to the best answer possible? And sometimes it might be, the best answer could be counter to what I've personally believed, right? And I have to reprogram my mind, or I have to concede and listen to other points of view, or just understand that many of the topics that we speak about are incredibly nuanced, and there isn't just one answer, right? That's why we have so many different political ideologies and viewpoints on what works or what doesn't work, whatever it might be. So I just wanted to give a shout out to anybody who is doing their best to keep an open mind, like especially during really difficult and polarizing times that we live in today, where, listen, we don't all have to agree on every single thing, but as long as we're coming about it from a place of respect and a place of genuinely wanting the best for, humanity, and specifically when I talk about this podcast, our community, our culture, that's my goal, is to be, bringing out the best of our community for our community. And I'm not always right. I'm never going to claim to be. I'm passionate, right? And I try to give you my take on things, and I try to be as informed as I possibly can. But I'm not always going to be right, and that's okay. Or we're not always going to agree on the best solution for things, right? Again, there's not always just one solution, especially when we're talking about really complicated issues like politics and social issues and whatever it might be. So I just want to take a moment to shout out to that listener. I really appreciate you for tuning in and keeping an open mind, and I think that's something we all could be a little bit better at, right? Myself included at times. Now, with that said, let's talk about what we're going to be touching on in today's episode. Really sad here. I mentioned this as like a celebratory moment last month. One of a really amazing figure from our community getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Unfortunately, that star was vandalized along with another gigantic prominent figure from our community. So we'll touch on that. I haven't done a podcast since the Biden-Trump debate, so I'm gonna just touch on what I've been thinking with that. And also, I've been really heavy on this topic about Puerto Rico and the struggles with the power grid and the power company Luma. So there's been an update on that, which is not a positive one, but we'll talk about it. I want to make sure I touch on it. And then on a positive note for our Mi Gente segment, I found this story and I just think this is a really great example. And I was talking to somebody via our Just Be Social Club. I was doing a one-on-one conversation with them, and I'll keep this short, but they were having like a breakthrough moment in their career that came as a result of them being shown a path that was different than the norm that they didn't realize was available to them and that most people around them didn't realize was available. And I thought that was so beautiful, especially in 2024, the level of opportunities that we have to do things in a different way, right? And I've always been somebody, my life is built around the idea of finding a different way to get to the result I want, right? And not getting stuck on the traditional path that many take to get there, right? And to me, I found a story that I'll share for our Mi Gente segment that I think is a perfect example of that. Somebody finding a way to live through their art that is in a non-traditional way and hopefully sparks maybe something in your head of a different way you can look at your path and what you're wanting to do. So we'll talk about that on Mi Gente segment. But first and foremost, as we always do, let's get to that nitty gritty. The nonsense, the BS, in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, we'll start here. Hollywood, the Walk of Fame. Jenny Rivera got her star last month, and sadly, somebody has vandalized it, right? So I'm pulling this story from NBC News. They say the Hollywood Walk of Fame stars of, and not just Jenny Rivera, also the legend that is Selena, both of them had their stars vandalized not once, but twice this week with black spray paint. Now, of course, this has caused outrage from the community, from fans, some of whom I was watching TikTok literally took it upon themselves, which I love this shit, man. This is the type of stuff I'm talking about. Like, we put the power in our own hands, right? They took it upon themselves to go to the star and clean it up. And Anna Martinez, who's the vice president of media and talent relations at the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, told NBC News that the first incident of vandalism took place on Monday. The Hollywood Chamber of Commerce had the stars professionally cleaned and then notified the police. But sadly, which is like fucking psychotic, the next day, she realized that Selena and Jenny Rivera's stars had been painted over again. And listen, I'm not in the market of conspiracy theories or, just talking out of the side of my mouth here, but two Latinas stars being vandalized, I can't help but feel like this had something to do with the fact that they were not only Latinas, but also Mexican in a country, in a time period where the anti-immigrant rhetoric is at an all-time high, where Mexicans are taking the brunt of a lot of hate. I can't help feel like this is somehow motivated by some good old boy wanting to make a point here. And listen, I'm open to being wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they find the person and it's, not some random white person who hates Latinos. But I'm going to go out on a limb here, in my personal opinion, say, smells like this was racially motivated. And again, listen, this is obviously a crime where, thank God, like nobody's life has been put at risk, but it does show you the effects of the rhetoric that is happening in our current society around immigrants, around those from places like Mexico, that it bleeds into things like this, where people feel the need to disgrace the legend and the just the honor and the memory of people like Selena and Jenny Rivera, for no reason whatsoever, right? And it's disgusting. I think there's obviously no way around that, and hurts my heart, makes me fucking sad to see that. But it's more of the product of the current world that we live in, and this is a tame version of the product, right? It could be much worse. Again, we've seen it be much worse. And again, rhetoric and ideas have real world implications, especially when they're coming from people with gigantic platforms like Donald Trump and the rhetoric we often see on the right, which leads perfectly into the debate that no one wanted, that everybody hoped would be something they could hang their hat on if you are somebody who is supporting Joe Biden. Sadly, it turned out to be worse than we could have ever imagined. Again, if you're a supporter of Biden. To be honest with you, beyond even just being a supporter of Biden, it was terrible. I think if you are anybody who has any faith, any belief system, or if you're an American, or if you it's a dark moment for America as a whole to watch these two men talk a bunch of nonsense. I mean, literally, we have two men up there arguing about who would beat the other in a game of golf at a presidential debate. These are the two men who are vying for your votes to be the president of the United States, arguably one of the most important positions in the entire world. And they're sitting there debating one another on who would beat the other in golf. That right there, minus anything else, is a really scary sort of projection of where we are as a country, regardless of what side of the aisle you fall on. I don't care if you are a Trump lover. That should not be something you're excited to watch and feel confident in his ability to lead the country. Now, on the other side of it, Biden, after months and months and months of the Democrats sort of clutching their pearls whenever somebody would talk about his age or his cognitive ability, or whether he was up for another 4 years of the job, Democrats had their worst case scenario come true. Biden was horrendous. Couldn't put together a coherent sentence. Couldn't even, my biggest thing, and that I didn't even watch. I tuned in and I had to tune out after a short period of time because it was nauseating to watch what was going on, right? But my whole takeaway is one of the biggest issues for Democrats that is a strong issue where it's in their favor is the topic of abortion, because abortion, majority of this country is in favor of a woman's right to choose, right? So that was if there's one thing that Biden should have been sharp on, rehearsed on, ready to go, it was that topic. And I watched as he fumbled through an incoherent sentence on the idea of abortion, literally leaving me just confused about what the fuck we were even talking about. He couldn't even conceptualize his point of view on the topic of abortion and his stance and his plan for Roe v. Wade and all these things. Couldn't coherently put together why it was important, right? And that was enough for me. I tuned out right after that, where I was just you know what? This motherfucker can't even hit the most important talking points that are his strong suit, right? Supposed to be his strong suit. And I, like many other people, I've been saying this since he announced he was going to go for re-election, and the Democrats decided to go, to be uncontested with it. That was the wrong decision. Again, an example of the Democratic Party failing the people by presenting them with a candidate that they were actually excited about. This is, to me, the same thing that happened in 2016 when you had Hillary versus Bernie, and the Democratic Party very obviously stood behind Hillary and pushed that through. And to be fair, in my opinion, I was a Bernie supporter. Had Bernie have gotten the nomination, I don't think we would have experienced Donald Trump as president. And you would have thought that the Democrats in that shocking loss would have learned their lesson, but no, they did not. They are going to weekend at Bernie's, and I apologize if you are, too young for this reference, but they're going to weekend at Bernie's Biden's corpse across the finish line if they have to. Meanwhile, they have other people who are very competent and I think are making a name for themselves on a national level, like California's Governor Gavin Newsom. Shit, even Kamala Harris. I was a Kamala Harris fan. I mean, I haven't loved her as vice president, but she's an incredibly intelligent woman who I think would be a great option as well. But Democrats, for the most part, you have some people talking out, and Biden now is really standing strong in the fact that he's not going to step down. A lot of people thought that he might over the last week or so. We'll wait and see on that. But it's again a failure of the Democratic Party to deliver the people what they actually want, to do the will of the people, and it's a showcase that, the party that's supposed to be progressive and all these things, they are still stuck in their old political games and agendas at the end of the day, right? They're playing political games at the expense of the rest of us and the free world as we know it possibly. Now, with that said, I will vote for weekend at Bernie's Joe Biden being dragged across the finish line over Donald Trump any day of the week because of what it means for our democracy as a whole. This is what I think people don't realize. Joe Biden may not be your favorite candidate. He may have supported or not done things that you wish he did. But at least Joe Biden believes and honors the idea of democracy. Donald Trump does not. I mean, the Supreme Court decision that we saw about Donald Trump having immunity. Donald Trump put into place radical Supreme Court justices who have now created all types of doubt and made a clown show of what is supposed to be one of the most sacred groups of people in this country, the Supreme Court. That they're supposed to be unbiased, not have any partisan bias, when very obviously they do with the decisions that they're making. And they are, even outside of the decisions they make in court, they're, going on boat rides and they're fucking taking all types of kickbacks. Like, there's no legitimacy to our Supreme Court anymore, which is a sad and scary thing. But the decision they made in regards to one of Donald Trump's many ongoing court cases is saying Donald Trump has essentially ultimate immunity in certain circumstances while being president, essentially, right? And the sort of analogy people are making, saying that it means Joe Biden could, if it's in an official order as president, essentially, could order the assassination of Donald Trump as president of the United States and not be held liable for it. This is the type of things that Donald Trump is pushing for. Folks, that's a dictatorship. The idea that a person can't be held liable for their actions because of the title they hold, that's what happens when you have an ultimate dictatorship. That's what Russia has, right, with Putin, where they're not even real elections, where they kill their political enemies. That's legitimately what Donald Trump and the Republican Party are showcasing, that they want to be the future of this country, how we handle things, right? There's even the Project 2025, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen going around on social media. And there are people on the right who are proponents of the idea of basically eliminating like federal government employees and replacing them with political allies, essentially, right? So the people in office are the people holding these positions, very important positions, government positions, are those who are aligned politically with the powers that be. So meaning that every single part of our federal government will be aligned with like the same exact viewpoint, and everybody's going to fall in line to essentially what like the dictator would do. That's what we're heading towards. That's what essentially is on the docket right now. And I hate the fact that it's basically freedom and democracy as we know it via the corpse of Joe Biden, or voting for the end of the United States as we know it, essentially. That's what this election has come down to. They've forced our hand to be that, right? The Republicans have done this with their extremism. The Democrats have done this with their lack of wanting to do the will of the people and just want to keep feeding us the same bullshit over and over again. And unfortunately, that's the place that we're in as a country. And while it's not ideal, it's not an excuse to sit out. It is not an excuse to rebel. And I don't ever want to tell people where to vote, where your interests lie, blah, blah, blah. But I want you to understand what is on the docket. Again, the country that we all know that is imperfect, but at least is a democracy that's supposed to have due process and is supposed to do the will of the people and is supposed to not be politically aligned in one direction with one person having end-all be-all power. That is all on the line right now. The country as we know it is on the line if Donald Trump is elected. And these aren't scaremongering tactics, blah, blah, blah. People are going to write this stuff off as, somebody like me is using scare tactics. It's a scare tactic until it's the truth. And we have to go with what the evidence have showed us. Right? You have people like Donald Trump, and I think the Supreme Court is even viewing cases on this, where they're trying to take away or diminish the atrocities of January 6th. And Trump has talked about pardoning these people, right? They're political prisoners. These are people who they're treasonous traitors. They didn't like the results of an election, and they decided to disgrace a government building and put the lives at risk of the people in power in this country. There's no excuse for that, right? There's no reason. That's not political prisoners. These are traitors. They don't believe in democracy. In the America they claim to love, they don't believe in what it really stands for. And that, again, is what's on the docket. More of that, if Trump is elected, is potentially on the docket. And that's what makes this election so incredibly important. And for me personally, why now is not the time to hold the Democratic Party accountable. That's my opinion. Trust me, after this election, all bets are off. But right now is not the time to hold them accountable. We have to do what's best for the future of this country. And I think oftentimes in this country, as a result of societal norms and our government, we are often stuck in a short-term thinking without thinking about the long-term results. Short-term, you want to stick it to Joe Biden and the Democrats? Okay. Long-term, you may not have a country to fix, right? You may be stuck in a dictatorship or a country that supports the worst things that human beings can do. That's literally what's on the docket. Food for thought. Now, with that said, let's take a quick break here, and then we'll touch on a couple more things. But yeah, we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and I want to get into Puerto Rico and Luma, the power company, right? And I had talked about this a couple episodes ago. I talked about it on my social media as well. A lot of angry people when you have an opinion, man. It's just a crazy thing. I mean, that's what they always say. Your skin folk ain't always your kinfolk, right? But Luma has decided to suspend $65 million worth of maintenance projects. Now, I am reading this from, I believe it was NBC News, was an AP article. They say the private operator of Puerto Rico's power grid confirmed Monday the deferral of $65 million worth of maintenance and improvement projects in the U.S. territory, with some repairs being postponed for at least a year because of budget constraints, putting at risk the already troubled grid and sparking widespread outcry. They go on to say some of the deferred projects include maintenance of more than 100,000 light posts, fire mitigation, and repairs on underground circuits, among other improvements. Luma Energy's head of regulatory affairs, Mario Hurtado, told the Associated Press on Monday that the suspended projects, which he aims to bring back next year, risk more outages across the island. Quote, "The risk is always that there will be more failures in terms of public lighting," he said. At a budget hearing on Friday, Hurtado said Luma Energy prioritized other tasks based on, quote, professional judgment, quote unquote, which they consider calculated risks. The lack of fire mitigation puts the grid at risk as hotter temperatures seize Puerto Rico, increasing the chances of wildfires disrupting the power lines. Now, he went on to say, quote, we make judgments based on what we have available and what our goals are, end quote. Although it entails... Continuing the quote, I shouldn't have said end quote, and continuing the quote, although it entails a risk, it's an acceptable risk, end quote. Okay. You know what I've learned in my life? When people aren't able to really give you a very straight and direct answer that you're able to easily digest, they're usually full of shit. So when they say something like professional judgment, Luma is using professional judgment and prioritizing other tasks over their promised maintenance repair that they were supposed to do. That's how you know they're full of shit, because what is your professional judgment? What does that mean? You had a hunch? That is you creating a non-direct answer as to why you have failed the people once again. You promised $65 million worth of maintenance repairs, improvements, and you're postponing it a year because of what? Professional judgment? Quote unquote professional judgment? You're prioritizing other projects? Interesting. Very interesting, especially at a time where blackouts are becoming have been, but even more of a major concern because of how often they're happening. Now, you had a member of the the House of Representatives, who's also running for governor, saying, Jesus Manuel Ortiz, saying, quote, it's unacceptable that Luma Energy can unilaterally decide to suspend crucial tasks. It's evident that Luma continues to fail in its responsibilities and that no one in the government of Puerto Rico is responsible. Now, I want to focus on that last line there. No one in the government of Puerto Rico is responsible. Yes. Where is the government? Where is the government outrage when Luma promises to make $65 million worth of improvements and then, because of professional judgment, decides, you know what? Let's let that thing wait for another year. On the back of having a widespread blackout of the entire island literally just weeks before. I want to, like, the level of fucks that Luma doesn't give is goals for me. The way that they can literally have just shit the bed and had an entire island-wide blackout and then weeks later say, we're also not going to, I know you guys are pissed off about the island-wide blackout, but also we're just not going to do the repairs that we promised, at least for another year. You guys would be fine with that, right? The balls on Luma to be able to say that with a straight face and sit out there giving quotes and be okay with it. That shows you they have zero fear of the public backlash. They have no cause for concern that the government is going to hold them accountable. Literally, they are the Wild West of not giving a fuck, and everybody's just taking it. That's insane to me. Again, just weeks ago, you had international headlines about the entire island having a massive blackout. People protested, people are annoyed, and then you can come out with a straight face and say you're not going to do the repairs that you promised. Bro, Luma is on some other energy. I gotta respect it. I hate them, but I have to respect the zero fucks that they give. Honestly, because it's wild. It's incomprehensible. Now, on the other side of things, what are the people of the local government doing, right? So you have Governor Pedro Pierluisi activating the National Guard to help with the energy crisis and ordered an investigation into the June 13th blackout. The Energy Bureau is also investigating and directed Luma and Genera PR to submit a plan to stabilize the island's electrical network. Okay. Listen, even though I think it's a BS investigation, I also have to be fair. Publicly, they're saying the right thing. Pierluisi, who has been an absentee governor, is publicly saying the right thing. They're ordering an investigation into the blackout. What happened? Also, people are in my comments like, oh, Puerto Rico's grid has always been terrible for a long time. All that is true. But there's also other things happening. Yes, it hasn't been a stable grid for a long time. It needed repairs even prior to Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria ruined that even more. But it has gotten worse under Luma, or at least you're paying more money under Luma for no reason whatsoever. So investigations need to happen. So if that's actually happening, which again, you can't trust a corrupt government who's probably getting kickbacks from Luma to do an investigation, but we got to take them for their word at this point. But this is more to the case of what I said. You start suing people. You start bringing them up and have to report to Congress, right? And just like Facebook, execs have to talk in front of Congress and be grilled about what they're doing. We need to see more of that. The idea that they're being directed to submit a plan, I would like for it to be a little bit more, enforceful. Submit a plan by this date, or else blah blah blah. We'll see what happens. Again, maybe this is a move in the right direction. They're telling us what we want to hear about them getting investigated and having to submit plans. Great. But you actually then need to have people with a backbone in office who are going to follow through on this and not just give us these fake bullshit investigations at the end of the day. But let's see what happens. Let's see. Vote. That's all I could say. If you're able to vote in Puerto Rico, vote. Tell your family. This is what's on the docket. Now, with that said, let's move into some positivity here. We will talk about an artist who I think is just doing incredible things in our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, so I'll leave the link to this in the show notes if you want to dive into this. I just thought it was a really cool, It's a really cool showcase of the opportunities that are available to those who want to create an avenue for their dreams, right? And again, this is an artist. You can insert whatever fucking thing you do, but let this be an inspiration as to how you can make money and make a living off of your art. Now you have Bobby Alvarado. I don't know why I have a problem saying it. I was gonna try to put some Spanish sauce on it. Obviously, I failed at that one. But Bobby Alvarado, who is an artist, he's a street artist, right? And he's actually a Cheetos ambassador, right? So his whole thing, he's a traveling muralist, and he is trying to inspire others through his art, essentially, right? And giving back is what he's saying, right? And I mean, again, I'm not going to dive into the entirety of his story, right? He designed a bag here for Cheetos. He's doing these different murals and things like that. He's traveling around the entire world. He's an El Salvadorian artist. And the reason I brought up this, it's fucking awesome. I mean, listen, Cheetos is a international brand, big, gigantic brand, and they're putting money behind somebody from our community who's doing their art. And it's beautiful. And I think for me, this is a launching point for a bigger conversation, right? We live in a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful world that is complicated and incredibly difficult at times. But also, we as creatives, as entrepreneurs, as people who want more for our lives, we have so many tools and resources at our disposal that previous generations never had. And yes, it's more saturated than it ever was. But as with anything, you can either choose to live on the negative side of the street or cross the street and look at it from the positive side and say, I have a chance to create a business and a life for myself theoretically without ever having to leave the house. And we've never been able to do that before. backstory. When I was first starting out in music, and I'm not going to dive down my entire biography here, but I used to play in bands, right? I was a drummer, and then I was a vocalist for a band. And I got into my serious band when I was about 18 years old. We started it. And at that time, we did have technology, right? We had things like MySpace available. Dating myself a little bit here. But I would book tours literally around the country as an independent, unsigned artist. Before being like independent was the norm, we were booking tours, self-booking tours around the country, literally utilizing MySpace, the technology that there was at the time, right? Which, again, we're a step ahead of the previous generation who didn't even have the possibility to do that, right? But our generation, we needed record labels, right? You couldn't even get things onto like iTunes and all that at the time. That was barely even a thing, but people were still buying CDs. But even then, it was like impossible to get distribution. There wasn't, unless you had a record label. And at that time, the avenue to get signed and discovered, labels were looking for bands who had like a decent MySpace following and were touring basically. So bands who were out on their own already creating a buzz, right? And I mean, that's kind of the precursor to what we live in now. But we actually had to physically go out on the road and somehow, some way, scrape together enough change from each gig to have enough gas to go out and spend a month traveling the country trying to make new fans. We would literally go to, at the time there was a festival called the Warped Tour. We would sneak in and sell CDs. That's how we funded some of the tour. But these are the precursors. We literally, like, the only way of really connecting with people and getting the attention of record labels to ascend to the next level was to get out and touch people, to get out and play as many shows as possible and network and make those connections, all those things, right? And again, the previous generation before me had it even harder. But my point is now, if I'm an artist or, I'm using music as my example, I'm a musical artist, I literally, hypothetically, don't ever have to even play a show to build a career. And there's a lot of artists who are doing that. I literally could, and we used to have to go to a studio, by the way, to record and do all these different things, right? And we used to have to print up CDs because, again, iTunes and all that wasn't really a big deal. You had to have physical CDs, so we have to spend all that money, right? Anyway, what my point being is this. In today's version of that, all we as a band would have had to do was put out videos on social media and get good at social media. Create content in our practice space, basically, if we wanted to, right? And never actually have to leave the house. Never actually have to go out and buy a van and trailer and figure that out and be on the road and making no money and doing all these things. We literally could create a career from our hometown. Right? Because that was the other thing, was like, in order to make a name for yourself, you had to leave your hometown back in the day. And what I'm trying to get at here, because I'm about to go down like fucking, memory lane over here. We live in an era now, fast forward, bands, musicians don't even need a record label. In fact, record labels are becoming more and more irrelevant unless you are trying to be Taylor Swift. Outside of that, you don't need a record label. Radio is irrelevant. You can become big on TikTok and develop a fan base and be fine. And stream crazy numbers and be good. Right? My point being this. We live in an era where the avenues for you to find success are incredibly diverse and endless. You just have to be creative in the way that you approach your art and the way that you approach trying to make a living off of it, or your entrepreneurial venture, or whatever it might be, right? The opportunities are there. You just have to look at it from a different point of view now. Forget what's been done. Forget what's the norm. You have to ask yourself, what am I not seeing? Where does the opportunity lie? Right? Again, I started this by mentioning somebody that I was doing a one-on-one mentorship call with from the Just Be Social Club, and she was telling me about a career opportunity that popped up. She had been looking to figure out what's the next step in her career, and it was something that nobody around her even realized you could do, right? Without divulging too much of her personal information, She works in like the field of science and was full-time salary under a specific company. What she didn't realize was she actually could create her own full-time opportunity and sort of dip and dab into different aspects of what she does. Instead of reporting to one place every day, she could have a couple different sort of a day here, 2 days there, 3 days there. And she could sort of build her own full-time job. And what she had to do then and look for was look for grants that are out there for people in her field that could then supplement that full-time income. And I hope that makes sense. Essentially, you're like looking for different sponsors to supplement your full-time salary, right? And yeah, maybe it's a little bit more work because instead of getting paid from one avenue, you sort of have like, let's say 3 or 4 people covering what is your salary. But within that is more flexibility and freedom because technically you don't work directly under one person. You don't answer to one person. You don't have to be at the same place every day. You're probably able to have a bit more flexibility in your time and schedule because the grants are buying into you rather than you getting hired by somebody. And I hope that makes sense. And truthfully, that's much of what I do. I have multiple streams of income, but I work with multiple brands as well. And that's how I've been able to create a salary that works for me, right? That's why I DJ. That's why I do the podcasting, right? I invested in a U-Haul business, right? I have been dipping and dabbling in some other entrepreneurial ventures, right? And combining all of those, I've created a salary that I'm happy with that gives me freedom and flexibility. And I bring up somebody like this because he's a muralist who traditionally, if you're like an artist, you're lucky if maybe locally, like you'll get hired to paint the inside of a juice, green juice place that just opened up or something like that, right? Many people are surviving off of those types of gigs. But again, in today's day and age, he has the ability to be discovered outside of his sort of regional environment. I'm assuming he got popular on social media in some sort of way to get discovered by Cheetos. And now through this, being a brand ambassador for Cheetos, he can travel around the world doing murals, right? And I know he's giving back in different ways as well. But my point being this, the opportunities now are vast. Right? As an artist, let's say 20 years ago, maybe more, you had to hope to have your stuff discovered by like a gallery owner and they would put on a show for you and then you would try to sell paintings and blah, 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 right? Now it's like, bro, you show up, you paint, you post it on social media, you do, you learn social media well, right? That's a part of it. Like educate yourself on what works because the algorithms, it's at the end of the day, what I've begun to learn, I'm not saying I've mastered it, but all of this stuff is science. All of this stuff is blueprint. There's a formula to it. You have to learn what the formula is and get good at it, right? And it's available to you via YouTube University, and there's plenty of consultants and things like that exist, right? But I'm sure this guy got good at social media or something he posted did really well. And now the opportunity to be a full-time artist is happening on his own terms, right? He's going a non-traditional path. He's a brand ambassador of a fucking potato chip company as a muralist. And I'm sure, again, this is funding his lifestyle for the time being. My point being, how many opportunities are out there for us if we just get creative and stop thinking about the traditional path and understand that we can create our own path and mix and match different things. We, again, just have to be creative with the outlook that we have and the way that we can get there. And let this just be, again, an example of how you can build the life you want in a way that goes against what other people consider to be the normal path, right? There is no normal anymore. It's whatever you craft and whatever you create. It's out there for you. You just have to find the opportunities. You have to think differently. What's not being done? How can I think differently than what everybody else has done? That's I guess my point, or what I want to inspire, hopefully spark with somebody like this. And yeah, just amazing stuff. Again, Bobby Alvarado, I'll put the link to this full article in the show notes. It's really cool. There's like a little video about his work and what he's doing if you want to check it out and get some more inspiration. Now, with that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, I'll keep it short and sweet here. I feel like I always say that, but this is why we can't have nice things. Jenny Rivera and Selena's Hollywood, the star on their Hollywood Walk of Fame, vandalized not once but twice. More evidence of the world that we live in today. I mean, listen, maybe it's coincidence, but what are the odds? Two Mexican icons, they're the stars that were vandalized here not once but twice. Terrible. Again, more sort of product and repercussions of the current climate that we live in, the anti-immigrant sentiment that happens, and more reason why we have to stay politically activated and active and motivated, I should say. Biden-Trump debate. Not a great thing to keep you inspired to stay active politically, but again, democracy is on the ticket. That's what it comes down to. I'm not happy about the choices either, but I believe in a democracy. I don't want to see how bad it could get. With Biden, at least the rule of democracy will always come first. And that's why I'm voting Biden. And then in Puerto Rico, with Luma, I mean, listen, it ended on a positive note, that article, with like the governor calling for an investigation, right? And them being demanded to submit plans and things like that. I hope that that's real. Am I pessimistic? Yes, because the government of Puerto Rico has not shown me any other reason to not be pessimistic. On the other side of it, Luma has, almost impressively displayed their level of not giving a fuck about the people as they are prolonging these $65 million worth of maintenance projects they had planned for about another year on the backs of continuous rolling blackouts and a massive one that happened just weeks before. We need to do more. I don't have all the solutions. I don't have all the answers. I'm passionate, and I just want to figure out a way to do more. And I know that talking about it, I know that proposing my viewpoint and proposing any ideas I might have, hopefully, again, just keeps this conversation going, and trying to be proactive and solution-oriented is what my goal always is. And then this amazing article with the street artist who's partnered with Cheetos. Again, start thinking outside the box. You want to do something, your art, think outside the box. Last thing I'll say is this. I come from a background of radio. Radio, as we know it, is dead. People are going to hate me for saying that in my industry, but it is. So for me, if I want to be a personality who speaks, I need to go the non-traditional route. Like, this is an example. If I'm saying, I loved radio growing up, I always wanted to be a radio personality, but it's 2024. That's not really the future of it anymore, is the traditional path that I thought it would be. What's the alternative? Podcasting, Twitch, social media, streaming, all that stuff, right? That's the new radio. And that's what I mean. You have to train your mind. What is the new version of the thing that I want? That's how you have to stay ahead of the curve. I want to do X. Is that a real thing in 2024? Or what is the new version of X in 2024? Right? What does that look like in 2024? And that's where you focus your attention. Stop trying to redo things, or stop trying to go down the path of the old model. And again, this is your art, this is your career, whatever it might be. You can't keep following the old model. The old model is outdated in almost every sector, every industry, every path you could think of. The old model is dead. It's dying. It's on the way out. What is the new version of the thing I want to do? And how do I begin to go down that path and utilize the opportunities that I have via technology? That's how you have to start training your mind to think. That's what I'm trying to get at. With that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. I will catch you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Peace.